There used to be one company, there's a gas meter on the plant next door, but this plant got sold. We have our own electric meter, but the gas just comes through a pipe. We just agreed on that in the terms of the sale, and they get so much a month, but we had no idea how much gas was over here. But we can estimate it. We estimated, put it in our model, and it's about 10%, based on the history of when we had detailed data, it's about 10%. So I can model that, I can get SCP certified, but if I claim half of my improvements were to reduce my gas consumption, then I wouldn't get to count those improvements because the gas is unmetered. So once we get a performance improvement from the SCNPI, by definition, it's rounded to the closest tenth. So if I get to 9.95 or better, that would round up to 10.0. 9.94 or worse, and you're going to another modeling method to see if you can find another 0.01%. Under the current performance pathway, this would be gold. What would this be? So you can have longer and shorter baseline periods if you can justify them, if there was some reason for that. Again, you have to apply for that exception and get it approved. But typically they're 12 months, and they need to represent the same 12 months or the same seasonality of the year. My baseline period can't start in July, and my reporting period start in November. Now my model can be built on any 12 months. If I'm chaining, I can build the model on the calendar year, even though my baseline reporting periods are not, or vice versa. Which is one thing we need to make sure we address in the one tool or whatever we do, because it's hard to do that now with the DOE tool. I can't have a fiscal year model in the middle of 2 calendar year, the way that the labels work out. So.
Yeah, the online tool is currently structured,
This is just a quick 1, 2, 3 of what happens when we start to look at the model. This we've already talked about yesterday and today, so I'm going to go through it quickly, and we're going to get our fingers bloody on the keyboard. First, make sure that you have clearly defined scope and boundaries, that you know what the energy sources are, what the meter data is, and that you have the live data. I'm telling you, don't work with the spreadsheet they give you without asking the questions. If I take this value and go back to your invoices in the accounting department, will I see the same thing? If there are any non-utility meters associated with that energy source, like purchase steam, which is probably coming from the local utility, or purchase compressed air or nitrogen or whatever it is, those meters have to have calibration, so make sure that you cover that base as well. This last bullet is just to say that I just have to have a way of verifying the reading. So if I can get to the reading, I know this is metered and that's metered, and then I need to, this is a sub-meter of that, I can get to this intermediate position by doing the subtraction, as long as the components of all that subtraction are metered. So the other thing to remember as the CP is that my SCP scope and boundary may be different than my the E and MS scope and boundaries. So 3M has an enterprise boundary for their management system, but then they have specific sites within that are SCP certified. In that case, they would need a separate scope and boundary statement for their SCP certification. Lost lost the screen over here. We need energy data, we need data on our independent variables. I can just put a thermometer out behind the plant and get some temperature readings, right? The weather. No, all of the data has to come from an accurate and repeatable source, it says. The protocol goes on to say that you have to confirm that it's calibrated, for lack of a better description, but I don't think it uses that term. So weather, typically in this country, we refer people to the nearest NOAA weather station where they can get histories and data, any input quantities and characteristics. You start with some set of assumed baseline reporting periods and start the modeling, and then you will adjust that as you move forward. So these are just some questions. We have the data, where do we get it? Let's get it. This can take a few days to a few months, depending on what you're trying to do. It took us about 6 months just to get the companies in Mexico. They kept trying to give me production in this basket. I said, no, I want production for each business unit in your facility. And let's look at it that way. So you really ought to decide this, though this is going away. There will not be multiple pathways in the new protocol. But the current one and the current exam still has the performance pathway and the mature pathway.
So in the new one, there's only one path?
Only one path.
What is that?
Do what?
What that is?
What is it?
Yeah, when
You have bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, and at bronze and silver, you do not use the scorecard, and at gold and platinum, you do.
So, I mean, there's just SEP. There's no, you don't declare a pathway. You just get SEP. They did drop to 1% for bronze, so you can get if you're 1% improvement in the achievement period, you can get bronze certification, in silver, gold, and platinum. But I think once you pass silver, the performance improvement stays the same in the new one, and you just add scorecard points. Whereas in this one, if you took the exam today, this you would need to know. Performance pathway is only based on what that SCNPI measures, and my bottom-up sanity check validates. Mature pathway, I have to have 15%. Again, I can look at that over a 10-year period, but then I have to add these best practice scorecard points. You have the current scorecard in that resources folder I gave you. We will talk about the scorecard on Thursday.
So if we get certified this year, what happens when SCP changes?
You'll have to update.
You have
And
to
you're-
take another.
Need to take another test?
Yes.
Oh, you mean you personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to
However, if you take the test now, we're doing a beta test on the new stuff in November, and I think that would be the way to go.
then you'll be certified to the new.
The new,
Requirements.
they don't, when they do beta tests, they drop the price.
So if you're going to need scorecard points, and as you move forward, this will be true if you want to get gold or platinum regardless. You want to start gathering the evidence and looking at the scorecard points you can claim. That'll make more sense when we look at the scorecard, but just keep that in mind. Get your monthly energy data. We talked about that. I don't know that we need to go over that. Make sure that you're working with the calibrated data and that you can identify the calibration source if it's not a non-revenue meter. If it is a non-revenue meter, excuse me. Think about the relevant variables. Again, I like to take the simple approach and see what they already have, like for production and things like that. Try to probe what they think about weather and its relationship with what they do. Will the heating and cooling degree days be better? Should we also be looking at moisture content, like relative humidity or wet bulb temperatures? Should we be looking at average temperatures? You might try several different approaches if you're not sure. For the most part, heating and cooling degree days seem to work pretty well, though I have had people recast those with different standards. So the US standard for heating and cooling degree days is 65 degrees. But if you recalculate that based on 70 degrees or 50 degrees, depending on what temperature you're trying to maintain in the space, I've found those actually give you better traction than the standard heating and cooling degree days.
And the NOAA databases make it really easy to change that, to get the data.
Well, if you change the base for the calculation, it won't make it easy to get it.
No? Okay, well, they ask you for a baseline, and first time I was doing it, I didn't know what they were talking about. And it seemed pretty straightforward for them.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, so it may be exactly.
Degreedays.net has this top-down.
What?
The degreedays.net, they provide the data. I think they take from the.
Yeah, now degreedays.net, you can get a spread, so they'll show you plus or minus 3 degrees, how many degree days for each. The problem with degreedays.net is if they don't have measured data, they'll estimate it. And they also take backyard readings and that kind of stuff. Typically, you can't use degreedays.net and pass the,
36 months.
right. The problem in Mexico is they don't have NOAA. So what do we do for weather data in another country, and we're trying to use this protocol? We're still working that out. You do need to do some review of the data. I've seen a lot of squirrely things. I've seen people duplicate, one month will be exactly the same values as the next month. What do you think? There's key entry.
You were missing, that,
Or things just jump way out. This is 10 times what the normal month usually is. Oh yeah, the decimal should go here, not here. That kind of thing.
I did get an electric bill once that was like $2,000. And it was just, they had mistyped in the reading. And then of course, the next month they fixed it, whatever. And, but if you were just going back through and looking at the bills and not paying attention, you'd be like,
well, when you're looking at 48 months of data, it's just a number, and if it doesn't really stick out, sometimes you'll start getting screwy things, and if you graph the data, you'll go, whoa, let me go look at that point. Oh yeah, see now it looks like they probably got they entered the wrong number. The other thing is you do need to do some data screening. There's a lot of conditions we could talk about. We could take another 30 minutes to talk about all the things that could happen there. There is a prescription in the M&V about how to handle it. So if you broke a gas pipe and you just had, it was just totally an anomaly that the month had messed up readings, you're going to pull that month out of your calculations because it would mess up the data. If the normal occurrence of things is that 2 or 3 times a year, something happens in the process and it goes over like this, and you would leave that in because that's not an anomaly, right? You just said 2 or 3 times a year it happens like this. But you can read about it in the protocol. So you have to look at the variables. Look at outlier data. That's what we just talked about. The other thing that you need to think about, though, there's nothing in the M&V protocol about collinearity or code-dependent variables. It doesn't say you can't include them. And, best practice on statistical process control is that you shouldn't include them. My experience has been that the modeling tool will spit them out anyway. So it's not as much of a concern, especially if you run the DOE tool, but I'll show you how to look at that and understand it. So figure out where you're going to start and what you're going to do with your periods, how you want to define the achievement period, and then you're going to develop the model. We're going to be looking at p-values. At least one variable in the model has to have a p-value less than 0.1. all other variables, it has to be less than 0.2. The p-value for the model itself must be less than 0.1, and the r-squared must be at least 0.5. So notice that these are all, the p-values are all less than. So it's not less than or equal to, it's less than. Whereas the r-squared is at least, so it's greater than or equal to 0.5.
So for the p-value for the entire model and the p-value for each individual variable, for example, if we have all the variable, or the p-value for every individual to be less than 0.1, will that guarantee the model p-value to be for the whole model?
Typically, that's been my experience. You won't have a bunch of p-values in the model that are good, and then the p-value for the model will be bad.
Right.
So what if, like, if we have one variable then it's less than 0.1, but the others will be, less than 0.2, will that make the model to be, guarantee the model will be 0.1?
I've never seen a model fail on the F-test. You either don't get past this, or this doesn't work. When this is low, or these are high, then this will be high as well. But, you get to this and it kicks it out, so. I mean, at the first point you don't meet the statistical test, what's the point in going any further, right? So, if this fails, and this fails, well, does that mean I kicked it out on that? That's probably high as well.
So the p-value of the entire model is kind of depending on the p-value of each individual.
I don't know that I can say that statistically. I'm not enough of an expert in that area, but the main thing to know is that the tool is going to make these calculations. You need to be familiar with how to interpret the results. So our recommendation is, the best practice is, if you can get all the variables below 0.1, you're probably going to develop a better r-squared in the model. As a practical rule, my practical approach is, if the r-squared is not 0.75 or better, I probably don't have the right set of variables. I'm still missing some data from a variable perspective that's explaining. It doesn't mean I can't submit that model. It just means, as a CP, I'm trying to help them get a better model. What I'll tell you is, we had a plant in one of the first pilots, and they couldn't get a model. They left everything running all the time. There was no relationship between weather, production, or anything. And they weren't managing anything, not energy, not equipment, So they had no model. It wouldn't fit this paradigm. But by the time they got to the achievement period and started to implement management system and had controls, guess what? They could build a model in the reporting period, and then they could backcast against their actual performance in that baseline.
Bernie, I was trying to find the recommendations in the LMD protocol document. I'm actually trying to find the requirements now as well in
The model,
Which requirements?
the ones that were just on that slide.
3.4. And they're all right in 3.4.
Okay. Maybe. Okay. All right, it just wasn't as specific as you were pointing out there. Thank you. Because I wondered where those numbers come from, not having taken a statistics course now in about 27 years. And so every time Mike Muller or others would bring up p-values and r-squareds to me, I'm like, okay, what, where, how do we decide? So thank you for all of that.
All right, so I've got to get the tool on this spreadsheet, on this workstation.
It's fine. But the DOE computer would take you about 5 days, but otherwise you should be good.
All of you have it, so what I want you to do is, In your exercise folder that I gave you, there is an exercise 9 through 11 data. Should say CPENMS Rev 4.1. All those others are just, I should have taken those out so they wouldn't confuse you. They're just different cast of the same data, but it should look like this. It should be 4 years of data with 4 columns: electricity, gas, production. And this is going to be, instead of showing you a bunch of slides on the tool, we're going to go through the tool together, talk about how to use the tool, and so we're going to do this. We're going to do the forecast together, and I want you to follow along with me. Then I want you to do the backcast and the chaining on your own.
Meaning you need to click the buttons and have the same thing on your screen
Right.
that is showing.
We're going to go step by step together.
So installing this is also something you probably need to pay attention to, because this is a place where your organizations may have trouble. My favorite is the visual tools not being installed.
Yeah, and I'm hoping this workstation up here is similar to the one, I'm sorry, y'all had to see Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, thank you.
That's not my homepage, please understand
Okay,
that.
just a
Let's
warning,
see.
I mean, I had 2 files called that same thing. One was an older version of Excel and one seemed to be a newer version of Excel from the drive you gave us yesterday. One didn't open at all, it gave me an error message, but the other one opened fine.
Use
So-
the newer version.
This is actually the older version. The newer version wouldn't open for some reason.
No, the XLS. We may have issues with that.
I'll be back.
Randy, may I use your thumb drive, have all the files? Because it was on my Mac, and my PC is cannot connect it to the network somehow. I cannot access my email.
So I'm going to download the tool. It comes in as a zip, in a zip folder, and you have to extract it.
It's not sometimes you have to like, close down the lid and stuff like that. And that's
And then, if you have a, I'm going to assume that this workstation is like the ones out there in the classroom, and it does require this Visual Studio Runtime 3.0. My personal computer, the one Georgia Tech gives me, my PC, personal PC, didn't need this installed. These machines, I had to run this first. It's just a back end of some Microsoft support libraries for the tool.
And that's a common thing you have to run.
If the default is you should try to run it. If they're already installed, it'll tell you they're installed. If you want to repair or reinstall, and you can just opt out of it at that point, or you can try to do repair, and it'll update the version that they got. Then I suggest that you run this setup file, and it will just take you through and say, we're about to install this on your computer. You'll know if it worked because when you open Excel, you'll have a new tool bar at the top called the ENPI. There it is. Doesn't make the menus bigger, but. So does everybody have that? Okay. So now I'm gonna go back to that exercise folder. Let's check what Pete was telling us.
Which one
Yeah, those two, then I clicked that one and it
Which
didn't
one?
load.
Which should I use?
The Jessica Brown one didn't work, but then the one above it did.
Hang on just a second.
Yeah, worked good.
Yeah, I've had issues with the XLS version running in the ENPI tool, so we'll see how it works for you.
Oh, okay.
What I'm gonna do, so I don't mess up my original files, the first thing I'm gonna do is just do a save as. We'll just call it exercise 9. But what I try to do when I'm working with a company is go ahead and get my spreadsheet of the energy and variable data in a form similar to this, because if you don't, the rows need to represent the intervals and the columns need to represent the values. So you'll notice I have, electricity, my monthly electricity bills in the first column, my gas in the next column, and then my two variables. And typically I will arrange it that way. Maybe it's just my personal preference or style. I don't know that it's required by the tool, but I'll put my energy sources first, the first however many columns, and then I put my variables to the right of that. We tried to keep this one simple, so it should, hopefully yours looks like this. So we're going to use the wizard. There's an ENPI tool wizard. You don't have to use that, but I suggest for the first few times until you get used to all that you have to configure for it, and it'll kind of walk you through the process. So it's the first tool. My highlights don't show up very good on the screen, but this ENPI step-by-step wizard, and you have to click on the words to actually get the button to execute.
Which one did you hit?
It's a nice wizard. It
What?
walks you through.
Which word did you click on?
The ENPI,
I got that, then the step-by-step wizard?
Yeah.
oh yeah, the step-by-step.
I was opening the file again, it worked the second time. So now I have it.
Yeah, just click on that.
XLSX file.
So has everybody got the wizard open?
Uh-huh.
You'll see it on the right over here. And then say next. Okay, so we're not going to spend any time looking at what would happen if we needed to enter the data. Once you get experience, you really go into this tool with your data already set up in the spreadsheet. But we could enter it, but since my data is already in the sheet, I want you to say my data is in the sheet, and it'll try to find the data. It's highlighted, the next thing it's asking is, we want to let Excel make a data table. You can ask me tomorrow at the break what an Excel data table is, but it's a subset of the spreadsheet that it can manage as an object. So click on that. The wizard will go out and look at the sheet, and it sees that I have data starting in A1 and going through cell, E49. And it's put that range in my window. If I wanted to change that because it missed part of it, I can change it. Make sure if you have headers that you check that box so it doesn't treat that first row as data. Let me suggest that you put headers in here so you can label it, because otherwise Excel will label it column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4.
And believe me, after the third or fourth look at this, you won't remember what they are.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about that is this first column has to be the date, and it needs to be labeled date. Not period, not anything else. Because it's looking for that when it runs in just a minute. So when you say okay, Excel will process this as a table, and you see it's applied some standard formatting to the table. So did everybody get the table? You okay?
Yep.
All right. Let's go to next. Next, it's asking to label the reporting periods. So this is a flag that the tool is going to place on each row of data so it knows, is this a value for my baseline period? Is this my reporting period? Is this in the achievement period? And they can then use that to do the calculations that we just talked about. But for the tool to work, it has to make these labels. So if you click on label reporting period, it's now asking for us to select the first row that represents the first row of our baseline period. And this is why it needs a column labeled date, because it's looking for a column labeled date to give us values to choose from. For this case, we're going to pick January of '07. But I've seen instances where I might have 8 years of data in here, and I'm only going to model the last 4. So I could, I could have more data than this and choose whatever appropriate year. But it's asking for the start of our baseline period. Remember that definition and that explanation we had. So January '07, the interval is monthly. The protocol says that you can build the model on monthly or weekly data. If you use anything more interval than weekly, you must have approval. Having daily utility data would be pretty daunting for most companies. They don't tend to think about it at that level, but you could build some really great models with daily data. If you had production and energy on a daily basis, I'm still waiting for somebody to go to that level and do this, because it would open up a whole nother thing, I think. The next question we have to answer is, what label do we want it to apply? So the tool will stick, if I wanted to label, remember we said the periods have to be 12 months, but they don't have to be calendar. So if I wanted to do a fiscal year of like July through June, and I would say that the first month, for my baseline will be July, whatever year, and for that I would choose a fiscal year label and just do FY1, FY2, FY3. For this case, we're not going to do that. You can play with that on your own. I want you to pick calendar year. It's going to look at the date for that row and just stick the calendar year in the label. And once you have that set up, you have to click this button, label the reporting period, for it to do that. And then now you get a column labeled period, and here's 2007, that's my baseline, and then here's my achievement period, 8, 9, and 10. So, okay, everybody good? All right, now, the next thing we had to do, the wizard's going to do, and there's some slides that I should take you to for the interest of time, and in fact, the sharpness of this class, I don't think you need. So I'm going to rely on your higher than average IQ to tell you, to remind you that when I convert my energy into the same units and to model electricity and gas and combine all that, I have to get them all in common units, right? And in MMBTUs is the common unit by definition for SEP. It says that in the protocol. It will tell you that all calculations have to be done in MMBTUs. But I have to do the site to source conversion, and there are several slides in the presentation to go through why that's important. We've talked about that. We've asked questions about it, but I think you understand. One, by definition, SEP is source energy calculations. And this is how we make that calculation. So I'm going to show you how the tool does it and how to use it. But I'm not going to show you the slides because I think you understand it. We can debate the merits of that, or if you really still have a beef about it, then you should corner Pete at lunch one day and tell him they need to change it. So just select next after you have the, and it's saying we need to convert units. So I've got to get all my energy in the same MMBTU units to model them. So click on convert units. And now it's saying which energy source do you want to convert. So let's do electricity first. I have the list of columns, and that second checkbox says electricity kilowatt hours. So we're going to pick column B. The next window is asking for what type of energy is it. And you'll see the calculators for the other energy sources like steam, or chilled water, or compressed air. That table that's in the back of the MMB protocol is, you could put those in and then put in your units, and it would help you make that conversion. Now, I will tell you that on the test, it would be helpful to know how to manually do those calculations for a secondary energy source like compressed air. But you have the table and you'll have it with you. You just have to be able to do the algebra to get the calculation. In this case, we're going to choose purchased electricity. And then it says, what units did you purchase? You purchased kilowatt hours. Make sure you keep that straight. It's easy for companies to get bills in kilowatt hours and do spreadsheets in megawatt hours. Or get bills in megawatt hours and they do spreadsheets in kilowatt hours, and you're thinking it's one or the other. Just make sure you keep up with the units. You'll notice that once we chose kilowatt hours, that it filled in the MMBTU conversion. And the other thing that it populated was our site to source conversion. I could change that. That's a field that you can change. I could put 2 or 8 or whatever I want in there. By definition for SEP, we use 3 for electricity. The protocol does say that if you, for some reason, your industry or your region, or for some reason you want to use a multiplier of 2.5 or 2 or 3.5 for some reason, you can apply for that exception and ask to use a different multiplier. I haven't seen that done yet. If you think about it, it probably makes no difference whatsoever. I should run a test just to tell you, but if I'm comparing the baseline and the reporting period and I'm multiplying both ends by 3, the analysis is going to come out the same whether I multiply by 2 on each end or 3 on each end. The relative ranking of the projects of gas versus electricity, that's where, you know, it might make a difference. But the modeling, I don't think would make much of a difference. All right, so if I have all that set up right, I should hit convert. And it'll insert a new column. And it's converted 15,281,000 kilowatt hours of electricity into 156,431 MMBTUs of source energy. So you can see, you don't have to be an engineering wizard to use the tool. All that stuff we talked about on site to source and all that, you know, you'll see in the statistics as well. The tool's doing the heavy lifting. As a CP, you need to understand how it's doing it and what and how to apply it. So we have one other energy source. We want to select natural gas. And this time natural gas is not purchased electricity, it's a purchased fuel. So what units did we purchase for gas? What's our gas purchase units? Therms, so select that. So why didn't I get a conversion factor? Don't I need to worry about how many BTUs are in a cubic foot of gas?
Therms is the energy unit.
Yeah.
I don't know what-
It's already been done for this calculation. Therms is energy. That's 100,000 BTUs, a therm is. Well, somebody's already taken the meter reading of thousands of cubic meters or cubic feet and converted that to an energy number and put it in the spreadsheet. Typically, the gas company provides the heating value, or they will deliver the bill already in heating units. The site to source for fossil fuel should be what? Should be 1. So say convert. And you'll notice that my gas MMBTU column is just 1/10 of my therms column, because it takes 10 therms to make 1 MMBTU. Guess what? We're all through setting the data up. We're ready to try our first model. So other than having to, fight, beg, and steal to get the data here, we're now ready to go. Now, the other thing I would say while we're talking about variables is sometimes people will give you production numbers and they don't track very well. Especially in aggregate, we've got lots of mixed products and that kind of stuff, but then you come to find out, 3M has this problem as well. A lot of companies have this problem. When they make Scotch tape, they make a roll that's 6 feet long, about 3 feet or 4 feet diameter. You know how many little rolls of Scotch tape that will make? They have a ton of energy invested in this giant core of Scotch tape. And it may get made, the Scotch tape that they're slitting and winding and shipping out today may have been made in that big roll 2 months ago. It doesn't show up as a product until it's shipped out the door as a little roll of Scotch tape. So those units or pounds going out the door in September or October were really reflected in the energy bill that they incurred in July. So sometimes people's accounting of production is when it's leaving the shipping dock, not when it came out of the paper machine, or when it came off the press, or when it came out of the factory. So inventories and latency between all of that is the CP, you're really gonna get sharp about, well, tell me how this happens and where this number comes from. Well, it comes from the sales department. They'll never take production from the sales department. Not that we can't trust the sales department.
Yeah, no, you can't.
They're just not, for energy, we need to know what was the activity on the shop floor in the period that we got this energy for. And when you can, and however you get those, sometimes you're gonna find that those come from shift reports or internal reports, and they're never reported like as a total monthly production. Because a lot of times they'll also net out the bad stuff. We had a 10% reject rate. And you'll find if you go back and just look at the units that came out and you map that, that's much better than what passed QC, at the end of the line. Now, the chemical plant was also known where they had a lot of intermediate processing, so they did all this stuff that was energy intense. It went into these giant tanks being held for the market to say, oh, we want this product, and then it went this way and got converted this, or it went over here and got converted into something else, or they had a third product, this raw material. Maybe they had a lot of energy getting the natural gas into that compound that they held maybe for weeks. In the modeling that I did, we didn't get to finish, but their production actually tracked really good if you did the inputs. So if I modeled their raw materials that went into the process, that actually tracked pretty well with the energy that they were consuming versus trying to track what was coming out of the very end of this factory into some convoluted process. you learn a lot doing models, and so, even if you don't have the chance to go do this for an industrial setting, go do it for your home, because you can get the energy bills for your house and look at the occupied hours or the, put the heating and cooling degree days in there, and you'll see some amazing correlations. It's a fairly simple thing to do. You'll notice that we have all those converted, so we won't say next. Excuse me. It then presents two options. You better plants guys might can help us with this part. I think this use actual data is for the Better Plants folks, is that right?
We can use it.
It does just your basic ENPI, not your SENPI. It looks at your,
Yeah, I think we try to use a regression model.
Right.
But if a regression model won't work, it's not valid, then we have to use it.
for SEP, you're always going to be doing that regression analysis. So select that. And now the dialog is asking us to configure how the model needs to run. The first box is asking for the energy sources, and it will build a model for every source we check. So which source do you think I should check the model of electricity?
Well, we've converted it.
Yeah, the converted column for electricity, which is electricity MMBTUs.
Double check what you check. Just a word to the wise.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you mess it up, you can just start
Unclick
over.
it,
It's not,
but yeah,
the world doesn't stop spinning, thank goodness.
don't just quickly run through the checks.
So natural gas, again, pick the converted column, which would be the second one for natural gas, the fourth column, or the fifth column, I guess, in total. That's all you need to check in that top box, those two. Now, it will build two models. It will combine the results of those models to give us an SENPI in the output. Next, the dialog is asking which columns that are left, and you'll notice it's removed the two that we checked. How do I know where the variables are? So you're going to select production and average temperature. And the only thing it needs to know now is how to define the periods and where to build this model. Which 12 months do I want to use? First, it's asking for the baseline. We already set the data table up to be 2007. That's why when you start this process, you have some, it's kind of arbitrary, but it's also kind of based on how far back does your data go. You know, if we're looking at the performance pathway, well, let's go back 4 years and see where we are. We're in 2016, that would be, 16, 15, 14, so 2013, maybe 2012. If you get data back that far, that's where you can start working in today's terms. The last dialog is saying, what year do you want me to model? You'll notice if I pick 2007, what does it have written beside that number? Forecast. By definition, if I model the baseline period, the adjustment method I'm going to apply is the forecast adjustment method. If I pick the reporting period, you'll notice it's labeled backcast. By definition, modeling that, then I'm going to backcast onto that baseline period and do my analysis with the backcast adjustment method. If I pick either of the other 2 years to model in the intermediate, then I'm, by definition, doing chain. You remember that scenario I gave you. The one condition that you can't do in this tool right now, and I think they'll fix it in the future versions, I have a calendar year of 07 and 09 for both ends of my achievement period. What if I wanted to model half of 7, or half of 8 and half of 9 for my model? How do I do that? That's not intuitive in this. The protocol lets you do that. You could build a model starting in July of 08 and went through June of 09 and do the chaining method. But I don't have any way, the way it's configured right now, to do that. We're not here to solve that problem today. I just want to point that out to you, that just because I'm forced into calendar years here for my model, doesn't mean that that's the only way I have to do that for the protocol. Okay, so if you look like this, we're going to go to next. There are two more dialogues that pop up. Again, I think this was from some industry folks and some better plant people, where they were also trying to do some cost analysis in addition to their energy analysis. If we don't have cost columns in this data, but I could have a column for my electric cost, I could have a column for my gas cost, and ask it to do some cost per MMBTU and that kind of stuff. You can play with that. We don't, it's not required for SCP, we don't need it, it's just in the tool as a convenience for industry. So skip checking anything and say next. The last is a greenhouse gas calculator, or CO2 emission. It uses those, as the EIA or one of the reporting agencies has an average per region based on the generation, production in that region of the country. Like you pick this part of the country, it's 3, or I can't remember what the conversion is. You get in the Northwest, it's less because they have more hydro, that kind of stuff. Don't do anything with that. We don't need it for SCP. You can play with that on your own later. Okay, so we are now ready to run a forecast model with 2007 as our baseline based on 2 variables and 2 energy sources. So hit calculate. And I forgot to warn you, probably the most practical warning I could give you. If you have other spreadsheets open, it will add to the time that it takes to run.
It does not like it when you're.
So the number of variables that you have in your selection and the number of spreadsheets you have open will greatly implicate and complicate and add to the time that it takes to run. So did everybody get some results like this?
Yeah.
Very good. You guys, I tell you, you are sharp. This is the first time, of course, it's a small class, I've ever done this, and everybody's got here. Usually I'm like, well, what did you hit? What in the world did you do? So I'm impressed with you guys. Very proud of you. This looks great, right? We qualify for platinum. Golly. Right out of the box. I can't
We ain't even
believe it.
doing it.
Huh?
We haven't even done any energy projects.
Well, we did some stuff in here, you know. So this shows us the model year, its forecast, so this is our reporting period. You'll see the cumulative improvement in the SENPI. Here's our SENPI, it's 0.832. And that, 1 minus the SENPI times 100 gives us 16.81%.
Okay. So, earlier, we had a 1% improvement. Now we got a, is it the same data? That's a great question.
No, it's not.
It
No,
is
it's
not.
not.
This data it's been scrubbed for certain reasons. I want to show you a little bit about the tool, and then I want you to try the backcast and change it. First of all, the electric model is on this. If you click, and every time you run the tool, you'll get a set of tabs that are numbered. So everything with 1
Is this
was
one?
that run or that configuration. If we ran it again, you'll get a 2, and you'll get another set, and you get 3. I've had people give me spreadsheets that had 27 models.
So can we?
I tend to save them, I might save one as the forecast model, one as the backcast model, so at least when I look at the file name, I understand what it's telling me.
So can we just I try to delete those tabs, but it seems like I cannot with those.
Do what?
Delete those tabs.
No, those are the results. So it doesn't
Yeah, I mean,
want
the
to-
results, can we delete those results?
Can you delete them?
Yeah.
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 Why you hide them?
No, well, if you have them, it doesn't change your, headline.
Well, click on the electricity tab, So here's all the possible combinations of variables against electricity.
Okay. For the.
Yeah, say that number.
So I want to show you how to interpret these results. So first of all, they're numbered. Here's 1, 2, and 3. Here's the DOE tool. This tool will try all the combinations of variables. So if you have 12 variables in this spreadsheet and you hit calculate, I don't remember if it's factorial or would it be 12 times
It's
12?
exponential. You do not want to try this with more than.
So my
like
suggestion is
6.
pick 1 or 2 weather variables, pick 1 or 2 production variables, and start to run them in subsets. And you'll begin to hone in on which variables have tractors and not, and you can get a final set out of that easier than if you just do the shotgun approach and do them all. If you have a wide spread of variables.
I will say though, if you have a wide set and you set it to run and then you leave and go to the kids' games and come back, it is done when you get back.
Yes. Well, I use it to try and figure out if I've got 4 or 5 variables and it's like, well, what should I be chasing around here?
Mhm.
Like 4 or 5 production and 4 or 5 weather. I'll do that. I'll just turn them all on and leave it and come back and check it later.
And then we'll try every combination of all of the variables.
It will also, it doesn't do anything to think about, should I be looking at all the weather variables combined together and no production? It doesn't, it's not smart enough to know that. So you have to know how to read these results. If the model passes all of the statistical tests of p-value and f-test and r-squared, then this will be true. If something failed, this will be false. The model that is in the SENPI calculation will be highlighted in green. So that's the model that it used, and it's based on this adjusted r-squared number, which has nothing to do with SEP. There's no adjusted r-squared in SEP. It's just the way the model chose. The tool chose to pick which model to put in the calculation. The r-squared you evaluate for SEP is in this column. The variable p-values are here. So production in this model has a very good correlation. Average temperature barely correlates at all, 0.198. The r-squared is high at 0.93. The model p-value is quite low, and then here is the model equation right here. And so each model has its own line of, if it has 2 variables, and you'll have a row here for each variable. If we did just production, you can see how much of electricity is accountable to production and how much of electricity is we can blame on the weather. The r-squared barely changes. The p-value is so low for production and it's so high for weather that weather is really not driving much change here. A little bit of variability on top of production that the weather
How
or
do you
the
tell-
temperature is describing.
How do you tell that?
Okay, look at the R square value,
Uh-huh.
okay?
If I do just production, it's 0.9129. When I add in the weather and temperature, it went to 0.9283.
That's how much variation is explained. And then look at the p-value, that's what column 1. The p-value for production is 0, and the p-value for temperature is almost 0.2.
Right.
That means that there's not that variable is not providing a whole lot of explanation for the variability you're seeing. It's not highly correlated to this
So
particular.
does it, it means it's not correlated, but it doesn't mean that variable is not contributing to it, just.
No, it's describing some
describing
component of
some.
the electricity, right?
Okay.
But
And you
it's-
should probably leave it in if this was your only choice.
But-
I would be curious, if this was my data and I was a PV, I'd say, I wonder what cooling degree data because this is average temperature.
Yeah. There's other weather variables you might want to choose, but remember, when you're looking at p-values, the closer to 0, the bigger the smile on the face. The higher the number, the bigger the frown on the face. And so that's the easy way to remember it.
All right,
And-
so look at the gas model. Very similar results, right? Production tracks really well. Temperature, again, not so well. P-values didn't change substantially, 0.03. But either one, you can pick either one.
Degree heating days, degree cooling days would be a nice thing to try here.
Now, go back to the SENDI results. and scroll down on that page, and you'll see that the tool has also told us which models it chose to run the calculation with. And they're listed down here. Oh, but wait a minute, there's a big red warning right here. The cells highlighted in red on the model data sheet are out of the allowable range of the model year values. What in the world does that mean? Meaning that the model cannot be used to predict the energy use, or the, I should say consumption there, predict the energy consumption for the time period shown in red if the variables shown in red are included in the model. It is recommended to select an alternative model which meets the R-squared and p-value requirements and does not include the variables shown in red in the model. If the model cannot be selected with the current model year, try selecting an alternative model year. For more information, see the protocol. Just like the help, right? Go read the
protocol.
protocol. It says go to the model data tab.
Oh, more than, oh, right.
Now, scroll down and see where the red highlighted cells are.
So what's happened is, if you'll look at the production variable, I modeled the baseline period and I was running over 20,000 units a month. The average is probably what, 24 or something like that? Look what happened to production in my reporting period. I'm lucky if I get to 17 or 18. So what it's saying is, if I build a model with production, and remember how well production correlated? If I could leave production out, I could use this model. I don't have a model if I leave production out, because weather's not going to do it for me.
I got something different somehow.
Inside the protocol, it talks about 3 standard deviation,
For the year, not the
Requirement.
production.
and that's what this is
Got it.
about.
And temperature should never, I've never had weather invalidate a model for the valid data range test. Because if you think about it, weather never, the test is, no, I can't get to the slide quickly, if you can read it in the protocol. The average, the mean, there's a valid data range for the model. And it is the mean of the data that built the model plus or minus 3 standard deviations.
Right, yeah.
So the mean for production, whatever the mean for production was in the baseline year, minus 3 standard deviations, plus 3 standard deviations. So that actually is in this table right here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out why, because I'm looking and I have the same data as you, but,
It's red.
Yeah, it is red.
no, my,
It is column F.
No, his
No.
temperature is red.
yeah.
Oh,
no.
what?
Which is wrong.
Yeah.
It's reading the columns.
Incorrectly?
It's a location.
All right.
So what this says is for production,
Yeah, everything else is the same.
the valid data for my production that I can put into the model is no lower than 15,336 and can be no higher than 31,962. That's the valid range for production that this will predict electricity
The names.
consumption
Okay.
Yeah, it's an
or
name.
energy
Yeah,
consumption.
somehow it's flipped the names of my columns.
And so if I come down here,
Yeah.
look at the mean of production for my reporting period. 14,940. Is that inside the range of those variables?
No.
It's below it. That's why this fails. I can't use this production, this model with production in it to predict production at the levels, predict electricity or gas at the levels I had in my reporting period. And that happened in the first pilots because their baseline data was before the crash in 08. We started this program in 08, and by 09, their production was 25% of what it was in the baseline period.
Yeah. That's just where.
And if you build a model in the baseline and try to go back, I mean, in the reporting and go back, you got the same kind of the inversion of the same challenge. So even though the p-values and r-squareds are very good, this model is not valid. it would fail the EV audit. Okay? You see that? You see how to read that?
So this one, the statistical model valid range, that's come from the statistical analysis, right? This that range plus or minus 3
Right.
deviation. But is it possible that actually it still works, even though the statistically?
It only works for those it only works for those ranges of production that I plug into it.
It's one of the fundamental underlying precepts of the model itself, because it is a linear regression, is that it works on what is considered a normal distribution, which is plus or minus 3 standard deviations. So it isn't considered valid if you're outside that range. Doesn't mean it won't give you some numbers that aren't somewhat close on occasion, but it's by chance, not by design.
We can't rely on the prediction that it made that this would give us a meaningful measure
Oh,
of energy
I see.
It's on
consumption.
chance,
I
not
see,
by
okay,
design.
okay.
So we need to fix it.
Looking
This
at
is,
it, there's
the
one
Koreans
really
didn't
low
like
mark.
this protocol because we have no defined confidence intervals, but this really is defining our confidence interval. It's basically saying between these values of production, I have some degree of confidence that I can predict if electricity or gas consumption. I get outside of those, then I've gone beyond my confidence level for this model.
You're outside the range.
Yeah, outside the range, yeah, yeah.
And I've actually worked some of these backwards, we end up in, the lowest I've seen is about an 85% confidence level for this plus or minus 3 standard deviation. It's usually 89, 91. So we're about a 90% confidence most of the time that we're fairly well predicting energy performance.
Plus or minus 3 standard deviations is 87.5% confidence typically.
So now what I want you to do, let me just show you one thing. Don't go with me. We don't have to go back through all that to run another model. We've already set the data up. We already have converted units and labeled things. But the tool is context sensitive. So if I'm sitting over here at the SENPI results, or well, I'll go back to the model day, wherever I am. If I say, well, I want to do another regression because the forecast didn't work, so let's try the backcast. When I click on use regression in the SENPI tool, or the NPI tool, it looks at the page that I'm at.
Mhm.
And see, now I have all these wonky columns for my energy sources, and you have to be back at the data sheet to start over. So go back to sheet 1, and then hit the use regression. And you'll notice it remembered our settings. What I want you to do is go back there and run the backcast. And tell me what it tells you.
Numbers always come up the same in class when you're teaching. Instead of saying,
Well, we got no red.
do it on the, you have to have
No
you
red
guys
warning.
doing that. Almost. And then narrate. Type. Whatever you say. It's the best way to do it. We've tried a lot of things, but that's the best way. We have so
I don't have a model that works for me.
right now, I guess you'd have to go.
But wait a minute.
I have it on my laptop, so I guess I could.
Did you get some results, Angie? Did y'all get 24.51% improvement?
Yep.
Awesome. Even better than platinum. And there needs to be a super platinum or something. You guys at DOE need to step it up for.
Oh, believe me, we.
So, but we've set the data up to fail because there's some teaching points here we need to make. One, I do want to point out, if I scroll down, it will show me again the models that it chose. But it's not smart enough.
Yeah, it should be showing.
It chooses the best R-squared model it's got, which in this case is terrible. And it puts it in, it's even in green,
Yeah.
which is okay. I mean, just, it's your job as a CP to know this model, we can't use it, I can't model gas in the reporting period. Right? It just won't model, it won't track the production or average temperature. Maybe we should have tried heating in 2 days. Maybe the product mix changed, and they've got this big basket of products they told us about, that this one product gets heat treated, and they didn't have much of that in the reporting period, they had a lot of that in the baseline period. I don't know.
This is a great time to say, tell me about what kind of changes you've made over the last couple of years.
Well, the one thing I will say about production, and I'll tell you the Nissan story, then I want you to try chaining, and I think we'll still have time to do all that and wrap up. The engine plant for Nissan, they make several different engines, and I think they might even assemble a transmission there. They make motors for the Leaf. They make crankshafts for engine plants all over North America. They send them to Mexico and other places. They make connecting rods. They make sub-assemblies of all kinds of things for other stuff. So they use their machining. They try to keep all that stuff running. So, you know, they were trying to, their first pass at this was, I'm going to model each one of those shops.
Sure.
So the crankshaft shop, the connecting rod shop, the leaf shop, the engine assembly shop. Imagine that you had 6 or 7 models and you got all this data, all this calibration, and all the statistics. And this tool won't combine those models like that. I'd have to take each one of those and then do all that math to get my combined SEMPI. Not that you couldn't do that, and it would probably work. It's a lot of work, but it was their engineer's way of into it. And I said, well, can we not do a model? Let's back up to the boundary and always try to start. If you're going to do subsets or you end up doing different modes of operation stuff, still start with the big picture and see what that tells you. Because it lets you peek under the hood, so to speak, of what the mechanics are really happening. So they started, and I said that, they said, well, we don't know how to turn crankshafts into engines, you know, when I'm thinking about production and all that. And I said, well, don't worry about that, just report. How many crankshafts came out of production, how many connecting rods came out of production, how many engines came out of production, how many leaf motors came out of production. And just have 5 production variables. What's wrong with that? They all have different energy profiles, and some of those products, I can assure you, based on my experience, will be the real deciding factors. They're either key components of other operations so that they're really a trigger for all these related events that happen at the factory that consume energy. Guess what? There were 2 or 3 production variables that had really low p-values and high R-squared values at the total energy footprint of that facility. We didn't get into that. Cummins tried to do the same kind of thing. They have engines, they have parts. Theirs a little bit complicated in that they have these extensive test facilities associated with their engine assembly as well. Just setting the test aside, they tried to get to an equivalent engine, so they tried to look at, like, I think it was based on man hours or overhead allocation or something, to all these
Machine
parts
hours.
and things they were shipping. But I'd be curious to know what theirs would look like if they just say, okay, here's the numbers we got, let's see how they model. And does it make sense to then try and get to some kind of combination? 3M is fighting that battle because corporate wants them to report their energy on a BTUs per pound. And as they work through SEP, they're recognizing, you know, not all pounds are equal when it comes to energy. Maybe we should be looking at production. I should count sandpaper by the square foot, and I should count Scotch tape by the pound, and thinsulate by the cubic foot or something. I don't know. So when it comes to production, if you roll it all up, we just had the same thing with Ingersoll Rand. They had three units in that plant. And their electricity is scroll compressor, yeah, the scroll compressor and cooling degree days, the R squared for electricity was 96%, the V values were almost zero. Now, they make other things, but what that's saying is every time the scroll machine runs out of that plant, it really is triggering a whole, it's a surrogate for all these other events that happen to get that unit out the door. Likewise, their gas was scroll and recip production, but no weather. But what they gave me 3 months ago was this production number, which was everything that came out of the plant. And we had R squares of 0.7 and 0.8. Because they have these, what happens is they also have a whole part of that plant that assembles HVAC units. This is a train plant. Assembly operations are not energy intense. You know, running the conveyor belts and we're putting fasteners and screws and assembling parts, it's just never been an intense, even in the automotive industry, the car assembly is very low impact in terms of energy. It's the painting and the welding and the other things that go on that really make a
Heat
difference
treat.
from energy. All that said, you know, that combined production had all those HVAC units they assembled, and when it's all totaled up like that, that had equal weight trying to represent energy as all these, they had all this heat treating and machining that goes on with scroll compressor production. And so, you know, to equivocate those and say that each one of those I'm going to evaluate, and the tool doesn't know, when you put a production number in there, it's going, okay, I got a production number. How did that impact my electricity or gas? So you as the CP, you know, I want you to think about, you know, backing into this and not trying to, or take the simple approach, I guess is a better way to put it. Don't overcomplicate things up front. Get that energy at the boundary. Take the production as they measure it, as it comes out of the facility, not as it's reported in shipments or sales, and see where that is, and then move from that to make a more informed next guess or next step in the process. So we can't forecast, we can't backcast. We also have the same data range issue. If we had a gas model, this one would have also failed on the same kind of thing.
Is that because the production range in the 2013 and 2010 is so
So if you want to see
different?
what it was, now here's my valid production range. With the reporting period model, if I average the baseline period production, and I got to change the, so 23,649 is out of range for that. So that would fail as well, if I had a valid gas model. I don't even get that far, I can't model gas. So you have 2 years in which you can change for an option. So run that, we've got a few minutes left. I'll let you decide which year you want to choose for chaining.
Is this part going to change, or is this pretty much the same?
Well, it's going to change in that your options.
I guess I better
increase.
choose one too.
Your options increase. Because now you're not required to have 3 years.
Not platinum anymore.
Ah,
Is it way that we can use 2 years data to build a model instead of just 1 year? Because 1 year probably just cover the production range kind of small. Maybe we can have 2 years to build a model, then cover a wider production range.
You can change the number of data points that it considers. It's in the front somewhere,
you'd have to get that approved.
but you can do it. The challenge I would say you're going to have is having the availability of data, because you know doing 4 years of data is a challenge. Doing 2, 4, 6 years of data could be a significant challenge.
Yeah, this is not too bad. I guess for the 10 years, like 15,
Yeah,
it's gonna be even worse.
yeah,
Because the production, can be changed a lot. The
Yeah.
validation
So
rate.
Angie, what did you get?
Which one?
6 years data.
Did you chain them both?
I did.
Oh, gosh, you're fast.
Uh,
Which one would you recommend as a CP that they use and why?
Well, that's what I was trying to remember is,
Well, I chose 2009 to chain. I got 5.544. No, I'm sorry, that's manual. It's 11.27%, which is still gold. I'm not platinum anymore.
Because 10 years ago, the product.
So did anybody do 2008? What's the
It is.
cumulative
We're
improvement?
doing it right now.
yeah, it's 12.15%.
4?
12.
Oh, 12.
Yeah.
So would it make any difference?
hmm,
No.
no.
And what's the difference? That's probably within the valid range of our ability to predict performance in a percent or two.
Right.
Can I submit this model on my SCP application?
No, that's true.
Did it come out
Oh,
true?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2008.
Well, can you submit 2008?
Looks like it.
I can definitely submit this model, 2009.
And you're basing that just on the results of that bottom?
No, it passes the data validity test as well. Remember, I have to have R squareds at 0.5 or better, p-values of less than 0.1 or 0.2, and p-values for the model less than 0.1.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
So the fact that those are true,
Mhm.
tells the layman that he can use that model.
And you're-
What usually PV have to interpret is, do I have the right variables in there? Can I explain that? Do these models make sense? Well, we didn't include variables that didn't make sense, so that's one way to deal with that. Is don't put models in there that don't make sense. Variables in there that don't make sense. But if I come over here to the model data tab, you'll see, here's the, production was the variable I was having trouble with, right? Here's the model production, the data that built the model. So if I average that, I get the mean for the model. Actually, I don't have the mean for the model up there. Let me do this one. You should remember what they were from before. So here's my valid range, because 2009 had more spread in the production that I ran that year. So when I built the model, my valid range is 54,555 to 29,373. And here are the means of both. When I backcast, this is the value that gets plugged in. When I forecast, that's the value, and both of those values fit within that range. So here's my data validity test, that works. My R squared p-values all work, so I have a model that will pass statistical validation to the model.
So for this validation range, we just check the average of the other time periods?
It's the
Or
mean, yeah.
Just the mean,
Mhm.
okay, it does not need to be every month?
Because it's annual, it's an annual model, right? It's predicting annual consumption, so I take the mean of the 12 months.
If the mean is in the range, it's
Right.
gonna be good,
Right.
okay. Well, I thought that we have to check every month.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I see, okay.
It will flag the month if it's low, but the test is on the mean, because it's the mean that gets plugged in to the model. Because it is an annual model. Now, I will say this, Nissan was so impressed, they said, gosh, this is powerful. So they turned around and started trying to do their monthly forecast of energy with this tool. But it's an annual, built with monthly data. For this thing to predict what's gonna happen in month 49 or month 50, it can't do that, and it won't do that. It will fail. It'll work great, and you'll be rocking along, and then all of a sudden, your results will be out of sync with what the forecast was, and it's like, I thought this was better than that. And if you could build a model with daily data, it would probably predict monthly performance. Because then I could put in my expected production and my expected weather next month. I've got all this granular statistical data that built my model. That's why I would love for somebody to do that. That's a whole other thing. SEP is not trying to build a forecasting model. It's trying to say, if I could run in 2007 the way I'm running today, I would have used this much less energy back then. That'd be backcast. In this case, I built a model in 2009, and it said, if I could take 2009 back to 2007, I would have used this much less energy. Likewise, in a forecast for the other half of the chain, it says, if I was still running in 2010 the way I was in 2009, here's how much extra energy I would have consumed. And those two get combined to say 11-point-something%. That's the ENPI tool. And the only exception that, as I said, that you might run into, and if you do in practice, call us. We can talk through ways to get around it. Hopefully, as the tools get updated and improved, if these had failed, we could come back and try straddling years.
Right.
So let's try modeling part of 08 and part of 09, or part of different parts of 08 and 09. Start early in 08 and include a few early months of 09.
So those models still need to be consecutive.
Yes.
They're consecutive so that the
To cover the full year,
seasonality
yeah.
So
is
they could be
addressed.
included.
Yeah, but you don't have to start, you can start in March to April. It doesn't have to be January to December. It can be March to April or June to July or.
And I can actually make this tool do that, but those periods that we labeled with the calendar years, they would look really screwy.
Yeah.
You'd be going, what in the world are you doing?
Yeah.
It's not intuitive. That's the only exception I can think of that I would say, if you get into that scenario, let me know. If we don't have a tool yet that will get us there, I can either help you figure out how to make this do it, or
You could tell me the fiscal year and do it that way, right? Just don't start from January.
well, now, yeah, but when I do that, now I've also adjusted my baseline and reporting periods.
Right. So
I don't want to change those. I want it 2007, or I want 2012 to 2015, but I want to model half of 2000.